Welcome to the Voices of Healthcare Equity. I'm Kim Tranquata, the founder and CEO of the Healthcare Alliance for an Equitable World, and your host on this journey. Our organization, driven by clinicians, is on a mission to address global healthcare inequity using telehealth solutions. Together, we're building a community of healthcare professionals committed to making a scalable impact on global equity. Join me in insightful conversations with global health innovators as we explore the current and future state of healthcare. Be a part of this mission. Let's create a lasting change together. Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Randall Bennett. Dr. Bennett is an emergency physician, veteran, vice president of the U.S. operations for the Healthcare Alliance for an Equitable World, and my friend and colleague for over 16 years. In 2011, he recruited me to work at the Tucson VA ED, and 9 years later, left me to carry on his legacy of servant leadership as he retired. Randy, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Kim.
You're so welcome. Let's get into a little conversation today. If you can tell us a little bit about your background and your career in emergency medicine.
Well, I was what some people might call a late bloomer. I'd done a few things before I came to medicine. I spent 4 years in the Army, and when I got out, I happened into medicine like so many things, just seemingly on a fluke. I'd had a girlfriend my last year in the Army who was taking an EMT class, and she would come home from class and chat about it and what they were doing, and it sounded interesting, but I didn't think too much of it. And when I got out, I was using the GI Bill to go to college, and in those days, you were reimbursed monthly on how many units you took. So I was looking through the catalog, and I didn't have a major in mind, and hadn't declared anything, so I needed a few more units. And I ran across in the catalog the EMT class. And I said, well, what do you know? I said, that sounded interesting then. It has enough units to put me over the top to get full-time reimbursement for the month. So I'm in. And that was in 1976. So when I got out of there, I became an EMT, worked as a EMT. Then I hired on with the fire department. I did that for about 18 months. And then I made a decision to go to nursing school. And I worked as an ER nurse for 6 years at a teaching hospital, a county hospital here in town. And then at that time, having looked at the residents up close and personal, I thought, I could probably do this and should probably be getting paid for what I know. So I went back and finished up a bachelor's degree and went to medical school. So I got out of residency. I was 33 when I started back to medical school. So I got out and got into practice just right around age 40, just shy of 40. And then I practiced both at community hospital, and then I spent the last about 8 years of my career at the VA there in Tucson. So it's been a great ride. And then I've been semi-retired since then. I worked at a small rural hospital to sort of ease out of working full-time in an urban ER. And then I worked also up on the Apache Indian Reservation in northern Arizona for a few months. And then since then, I've kept occupied. I'm the medical advisor for many units of the National Park Service, as well as a couple of national forests. So that's kind of brings me up to where I am today.
That is an amazing career trajectory. You've touched almost all of the aspects of a healthcare system along your own personal journey. So nursing school, EMT, med school, working with veterans, and working with National Parks Service. I see a lot of service to maybe underrepresented groups, special populations in that journey. How has that been? What have you learned along the way as an EMT, a nurse, a doctor, a veteran, and a medical advisor about what is working and what's not working in healthcare?
I think one of the things that always attracted me to populations and to groups of people that were underserved was they had so much difficulty in just their daily lives, you know, just living, working, shelter, food, those things, that any additional burden on them in terms of their health was, you know, sometimes insurmountable. And I was exposed to this uh, first when I was in the Army. I did 8 months of service in the Republic of Vietnam in the early 70s. And you would see people there that were struggling just to get by and meet their daily needs. And if they had an injury or an illness, it was just enough to push them over the edge. And in many cases, it was their end. And sometimes these were fairly trivial problems that could have been managed easily. So that made an impact on me to begin with. And since that time, I've looked at a lot of different places. I had another pretty moving experience. I had a friend of mine who was in the Peace Corps in the late 70s in Senegal. And I went and spent a month with him there, and also saw the impact, you know, that we could have in a situation like that. That inspired me a little bit further. I didn't have a real chance to act on much of it until I became a physician, and then I had a great opportunity that when Columbia University put on an exchange program where if you would go and teach for a month in Ghana, they graciously would put you up, provide you with housing, and to work at a regional hospital there. And I loved it. It was a great time. But one of the interesting things, I had a partner of mine there with me, um, and she and I both noticed that you know, when we left, that things were kind of probably going to go back to sort of the way they were before we got there. And that was something that we viewed with more than a little dismay, because you know, we felt like we'd certainly taught everyone as much as we could, but in terms of an ongoing program or ongoing structure there, that it was pretty much going to be gone. We used to joke about it being similar to the last days of the Roman Empire. You know, things would just sort of peter off and then die off, and it was a little disappointing. We were sad to go. I had gone back to Ghana again a couple of years later, and went to one of the largest teaching hospitals in West Africa in Kumasi, Ghana, and took a couple medical students with me. And they hold the distinction. They have a UN sponsored residency in emergency medicine there that is primarily a project between the UN and the University of Michigan. The Michigan Medical School has on their faculty a Ghanaian physician who inspired this. And that was a little better because the work we did there, at least we knew there was somebody there to sort of carry on and continue to expand on that. But still wasn't quite, we knew that things weren't going to be quite the same when we left. That's why when you contacted me about the telehealth opportunity, the first time I went was to the Philippines. I was pretty eager to look at that because the idea that you could go there, make an impression, you didn't have all the logistical problems of getting there, transportation, and then once you're done, you leave, and it's like almost you were never there, except for whoever's life you impacted during that short period that you were there. But the idea to be able to go back and have an ongoing presence just looked perfect. It was one of those forehead smacking moments where I went, wow, how come nobody thought about this before? So it's great. I love it.
Wow. Thank you, Randy. That's a lot of experience in helping underserved populations, and you certainly brought it all the way around to the telehealth and the telehealth opportunity. So, Randy, what you mentioned is the ability to continue international medical outreach work for more than a month engagement to have a lasting impact in the community. But I like the way you tied it in also to the Ghanaian residency, because part of what a good intervention would do is raise the capacity in the community that your interventions in. Tell us a little bit about how, what is it like for you to be able to, for the first time, do this work in the Philippines? Was it difficult? Was there any logistical challenges? What would you say to somebody that can't imagine how this would work?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, with COVID, I think we all became a little more skilled with either Zoom or FaceTime. And I had started using Zoom for Park Service and Forest Service training during that time. And it was pretty much a 5 or 10 minute process. I don't think of myself particularly as computer literate. Um, I followed the directions, and setting up to go to the Philippines was just a matter of downloading the software. It installed itself. I punched a button, it connected me, and it's pretty straightforward. If you can text or FaceTime on a phone, you can make this stuff run. There are some challenges with the connection sometimes. It's everything's not the first world, so sometimes the bandwidth is a little sketchy and you'll get bumped off and you got to get plugged back in. But you're sitting in your comfortable chair with a mouse clicking stuff. It's not like you got to run around the block and bang on somebody's door and say, "Hey, my internet's out." Pretty straightforward. It was. There's no technological challenge to be sure. I know a lot of my colleagues, as they've aged, have become a little technophobic, and there's certainly nothing here that's difficult.
And what do you, as a semi-retired career emergency physician, what's what's in it for you? What do you get out of being able to do that?
Well, I'm sure there's no secret to anybody. I mean, the parts of our job that we like the least are dealing with administrators and other departments and people that are generally sometimes impeding rather than assisting. And those things are all kind of stripped away. That's just you and the patient. And you're there for an episode where you can give them the benefit of everything that you've learned. And it's just a great opportunity. You get a very focused period of time when you're just dealing with the patient, and that is it. And that's the most satisfying part of my practice ever. And so it's kind of like we took all the other junk and got rid of it. So it is great. It's very similar to practicing in the third world, where you go and there's really not any administrative concerns. But in this case, it's sitting in your comfy chair, and it's not tough at all. That's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much.
So, Dr. Bennett, you don't speak Tagalog or Kiswahili. How are you able to provide healthcare by telehealth in places like the Philippines or Kenya without knowing the local language?
Well, you kind of sold me short there because I do speak Tagalog and I do speak Swahili,
That's
but
awesome.
beyond hello, goodbye, and where's the nearest place for something cold to drink? That's pretty much my limit. But I know it's always satisfying when you can say hello to someone and they realize that you've at least taken the trouble to learn a salutation. So that's always good. But the you mentioned that in the context, I think, is that the the assistants that you have on the other end, they are great. Um, they're obviously very committed to what they're doing. They're very conscientious. They work real hard. They're very patient. And as you know, in medical practice, you often end up asking the same question, maybe 3 or 4 times in a slightly different way, just to get the information that we need. And so I think they have over time, if nothing else, have sort of learned that's where we're going. And they're always very helpful. I've even done some basic exams, having them go through a range of motion and a joint, as I direct them, and they're always eager to do that, and extremely helpful. The other thing that makes this pretty doable is the computer linkage to the stethoscope. So you can have them plug in a stethoscope for you. You can listen to the heart. You can listen to the lungs. And it's not a bad auscultation at all. And the other thing is there's a otoscope that can be plugged in. So if you want to look at something as simple as a child's ears, I often use it just to look at things like skin lesions. So I can have them angle the light off to the side and give me a little context as to what the lesion is. Use it to look in the pharynx, um, wounds, of that type. I've had them check for edema and shine the light across it to see how deep it is. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I'm sure that somebody's probably working on, a device to allow you perhaps a little more sophisticated exam. But I got to be honest with you, for the most part, I have rarely, I would say, not never, but rarely have I felt where I could not examine them sufficiently in order to treat them. A couple of times on these calls, I've referred people out to doctors in the area so that they could be physically examined because I felt it was pretty important. But for the most part, well, as you well know, as an emergency physician, pretty much 90% of what we do is sort of getting the history. And at that point, sometimes that other 10% is critically important, in which case you can pass them off to somebody there at the site and know that they'll be seen. So,
Spoken like someone who has worked in resource limited conditions and in the Army. Uh, what that is wonderful advice. I mean, I hear in everything you say, you just using the tools that you have available and figuring out how to make it work for the situation you're in. But you answer an important question I think a lot of people have questions about, because a lot of people are concerned you don't know how to speak with the patient necessarily, or you don't have the cultural competency to understand what they have in the area and they can carry out. So I think a little bit about what we do in this telehealth environment as a medical coaching intervention, because we can't do and command the medical care the way we do in our US healthcare system. We don't write orders, we don't tell people what to do, and we don't have command over how things can be carried out, but we can only speak with the healthcare team on the ground. Then that can vary, right? That can vary from a medic that has one day of orientation to a community healthcare worker to a nurse to a primary care doctor. That can be variable, but we have to be able to coach whoever that is to help them carry out the best care, because they're carrying out the care under our advisement. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Bennett?
it's not much different than really working in the emergency department. Um, we may call it an order when we write it, but let's face it, if the nurse looks at it and says, I don't like this, or I don't understand what's going on, you've got to educate them as to what's going on and make it a little more palatable. The technician, the radiologic technician, the ultrasound tech, the respiratory therapist, these are all people. It's always a community effort. And of course, the people that don't understand that are in for a horrible career with a lot of headbanging. But in terms of what goes on, with interfacing with them, they're generally looking to help people, and you give them what they figure is probably good advice, and so they're happy to follow it. I haven't had anybody look at me and say, "That doesn't sound right. I don't think I've got that," or "No, I don't want to do that." They just nod and they thank you, and they say, "Yeah." And the technicians there that are assisting, they take good notes, write down, they make sure that the questions are answered. Um, it's overall, I would have to say it's not a push pull kind of experience. It's more like it just sort of flows along because these people are happy to get care, and for them, it's a pretty good opportunity.
This ends part one of our two-part episode with emergency physician Dr. Randall Bennett